The money in your pocket right now is worth far less than it was when your father was young, but you don't feel it, because the numbers got bigger. Your salary went up, more zeros in your account. It's just that everything costs so much more. This isn't a coincidence, and it's not a government mistake. This is a cycle that repeats throughout history. And once you see this cycle, you can't unsee it. Imagine the year 260 AD. You're a grain merchant near Alexandria. You've been doing this for decades. Your father did it before you. Even your grandfather did. One morning, a Roman centurion arrives to buy wheat for a nearby garrison. He pays in silver denarii, the official currency of the Roman Empire. But something feels wrong. You've handled these coins your entire life. You know their weight, their color, the sound they make when they hit the table. These coins are lighter, darker. You scratch the edge, bronze, underneath a thin wash of silver. After the centurion leaves, you open your strongbox. Inside are coins from your grandfather's time. You place them side by side. Old coins, pure silver. New coins, bronze with a coating. And in that moment, you understand something historians will spend 2,000 years documenting. This isn't a financial decision. It's the slow death of a monetary system. This story isn't really about Rome. It's about what happens to every monetary system in history. They don't die in explosions. They die in small decisions. A little more spending here. A little less backing there. An emergency measure that becomes permanent. Each step seems reasonable, until the system is no longer the same as it once was, and the process moves so slowly that every generation simply adapts. Your parents say things used to be cheaper. You say everything is expensive. Your children assume this is normal, until eventually there's nothing left to normalize. When most people imagine currency collapse, they picture chaos, bank runs, breadlines, worthless paper money. That's the Hollywood version. The real process is far quieter. People experience rising prices that always have an explanation. Supply chains, corporate greed, bad harvests, foreign enemies. Each explanation sounds logical, but most people don't see the underlying cycle. These are not separate problems. They are symptoms of the same disease. The destruction of the unit of account itself. Money is not wealth. Money is a claim on wealth, a symbol that represents labor, resources, and production. When a monetary system is healthy, that claim holds its value over time. A day of labor today should buy roughly what a day of labor bought years ago. When a monetary system begins to fail, that claim slowly erodes. At first, the system still appears normal. Salaries are paid, stores accept the currency, mortgages are issued, everything seems functional. But if you compare the currency to real assets, land, commodities, productive businesses, the erosion becomes visible. The Romans never announced that the denarius was losing value. Bread simply cost more denarii over time. The measuring stick itself was shrinking. Throughout history, currencies have rested on three foundations. First, commodity backing, money redeemable for something physical like gold or silver. Second, institutional trust, belief that the issuing authority is stable and responsible. Third, legal enforcement, taxes and obligations must be paid in that currency. Modern currencies rely mostly on trust. Commodity backing has largely disappeared. Which brings us to the engine that drives monetary decay. Governments spend more than they collect in taxes. The difference is financed through borrowing or currency creation. At first, this happens during crises, wars, financial collapses, pandemics. Borrowing grows, debts accumulate, Interest payments rise. Eventually, governments face a difficult choice: cut spending, raise taxes, or create more currency. Cutting spending is politically painful. Raising taxes is unpopular. Creating currency is easier. Its costs appear later, as rising prices. So everyone chooses the easy path. Not because governments are evil, because the incentives make other choices nearly impossible. Rome followed this exact path. The denarius began as nearly pure silver. Over the next 2 centuries, its silver content was gradually reduced, 95%, then 75%. Eventually, it fell below 5%. By the time of Emperor Diocletian, the coin was essentially bronze. The process took generations. Life continued. People adapted, prices rose, old coins were hoarded. The system didn't collapse overnight. It simply became less functional year by year. France experienced a similar cycle in the 18th century. By the late 1700s, enormous war debts had pushed government finances to the brink. Roughly half of government spending was going toward interest payments on existing debt. The system had reached a mathematical limit. Revolution followed. The revolutionary government issued paper money called assignats, backed by confiscated church lands. Within a few years, the currency lost almost all of its value. Britain offers a slower example. For over a century, the British pound was the world's most trusted currency. It was backed by gold and supported global trade. But wars, debt, and economic pressures gradually weakened that system. Gold convertibility was abandoned. The pound was repeatedly devalued. Over decades, it lost its position as the world's reserve currency. No single dramatic collapse. Just a long sequence of decisions that slowly changed the system. A question historians rarely ask directly is this: who benefits when a currency loses value? The answer is a little sad. Debtors benefit. When money becomes less valuable, debts become easier to repay. And in modern economies, the largest debtor is usually the government itself. This creates a structural incentive. No conspiracy is required. The system naturally drifts toward policies that reduce the real burden of debt. Others benefit too. People who borrow to buy assets like real estate. Financial institutions that handle the flow of new money. Those who receive newly created currency early. Before prices adjust. Economists call this the Cantillon effect. New money enters the economy unevenly. Early recipients gain purchasing power. Late recipients face higher prices. Who loses? Savers. People who hold cash or fixed income assets see their purchasing power erode. Retirees. Civil servants whose wages are raised slowly. Young people trying to buy homes. The defining economic trend of recent decades has been the widening gap between asset prices and wages. In 1970, a typical American home cost about twice the median annual income. Today it costs more than 5 times. Homes didn't suddenly become 5 times better. The measuring stick changed. Another important factor is velocity of money. How quickly money changes hands. When people trust a currency, they are comfortable holding it. When trust declines, behavior changes. People spend money faster or convert it into assets. This can accelerate inflation. Eventually, if confidence collapses entirely, people stop using the currency at all. They switch to foreign currencies or barter. At that point, the monetary system has effectively died. The US dollar has one advantage previous currencies often lacked: reserve currency status. It is used globally for trade, debt, and central bank reserves. This creates constant demand for dollars. Economists sometimes call this an exorbitant privilege. But reserve currency status is not permanent. The Dutch guilder once held that position. Later, the British pound. Both eventually lost it. The dollar has dominated global finance since 1944. Historically, reserve currencies tend to last around a century. This doesn't mean the dollar will collapse tomorrow. But history says the privilege will eventually end. When it does, the transition can be painful. Borrowing becomes more expensive. Foreign demand for the currency falls. Inflation that was once exported abroad returns home. Britain experienced this transition across much of the 20th century. Since 2008, central banks have created unprecedented amounts of new currency. Balance sheets expanded dramatically in response to financial crises and the pandemic. Each intervention was justified by emergency conditions, but once expanded, monetary systems rarely return fully to their previous state. The result is a system increasingly dependent on continued monetary support. Debt levels are high. Interest rates cannot rise too far without destabilizing markets. Asset prices have become deeply intertwined with monetary policy. These dynamics are not partisan observations. They are structural characteristics of the modern financial system. When governments recognize a monetary system is weakening, their responses tend to follow familiar cycles. First, they deny it. Officials insist the situation is temporary, then scapegoating. Blame is assigned to speculators, corporations, or foreign actors. Sometimes reform attempts follow. New policies meant to stabilize the system. If those fail, eventually a reset occurs. Currencies are replaced or restructured. Savings may be wiped out. Debts renegotiated. And the cycle begins again. History shows this pattern repeating across countries and centuries. In 1923, during the hyperinflation in Germany, an economist explained the process to the Reichstag. His answer became famous. Each step seemed necessary at the time. Each decision was made by reasonable people responding to real problems. No one had tried to destroy the currency. It simply happened one decision at a time. That's how monetary systems die. Not through conspiracy. Through incentives, not through malice. Through momentum. The Roman merchant in 260 AD didn't have economic theory, but he knew something was wrong. The coins were lighter. Trust was fading. The system was changing. He didn't know how long the process would take. Neither do we. But history has shown the cycle again and again. Currencies weaken slowly, then suddenly. And when the transition finally becomes obvious, most people are already too late to react. Because during the long decline, people simply adapt. Prices rise, life becomes harder, and the numbers on the screen keep getting bigger. This is historical and educational analysis, not financial or investment advice. If this perspective was useful, like and subscribe.